So we are moving to our next exciting panel, and we want to look at technology on the front line. We are going to change the setup. Do we have a mic? I would just need a mic very quickly. Very good. All right. Because what I want to do in the time when the stage is set up, I want to collect a couple of questions before I hand over to the moderator and to our panelists. So, Ben, what is your expectations for this panel?
Sorry, now I'm a bit.
Surprised?
I'm a bit surprised. Yes. What's actually the topic of the panel?
Oh, you didn't study our program.
I didn't. No.
So
I love to be surprised.
So we prepared those wonderful slides up there. So it's about technology and defense.
Well, that's probably one of the most important topics in the how to say upcoming month, I would say. And I think we can't really separate it from the question of investments. So that's probably one of the most important things to discuss: how we can combine, how we can make sure that investments in defense are meaningful in a way that not each and every single state is actually investing, but that we see more cooperation, and that is specifically challenging in these times, I would say.
Thank you so much. And if you don't know Ben, catch him later. He was responsible for all digital matters and the digital policy of the last German administration. Thomas, what is your expectation?
To the next panel or to the third one?
No, to this one coming up,
all
to
right.
defense.
Okay, my only question is, how do you allocate a center of competence within Europe so that we can really share the infrastructure that we have to build modern weapon systems?
Ooh, so big expectations. And maybe I can bring in one last person to share expectations, not one of our speakers, because you will have ample of opportunity later on to discuss. Who would like to say something? What would you say? Can I bring you in? No.
Yes, I would like to know whether we really can make a defense system for a common defense system, or whether we are so miles away from that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And David, what would you say?
I'm just here to listen to Payne speak because he's such a Washington insider, and I want to see what he has to say.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You see, this is what we do at Aspen. We try to bring in everybody, and that can sometimes be a surprise, but it keeps our audience up on their feet. So, if I may ask my moderator to join me up here, give him a big applause. Randolph Carr is with us today. And I'm going to give this mic to you. Thank you so much for taking over the moderation. And thank you so much for being here and not at the NATO summit.
Right.
Where a lot of your colleagues of the Munich Security Conference currently are. So what do you, I see you also, you are mic'd, so we don't actually need this anymore. So what would you like to get out of this? What would you like to get out of this panel?
Yeah, you just mentioned the elephant in the room, I think. As we all know, as we speak here, transatlantic leaders are in The Hague for the NATO summit, probably one of the most anticipated summits in recent memory. And all the talk leading up to it has been about Europe and whether Europe can and will step up for its own defense credibly enough to avoid another big blow-up with Donald Trump. So one of the big questions, I think, going forward out of that is what role will tech play in Europe stepping up? Is Europe's tech ecosystem going to be part of the solution or part of the problem? And can Europe leverage the strengths that it does have to, be a more credible partner to the US, be maybe a force to be reckoned with on the global stage, or not? And I'd really like to get the panel's takes on that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And with this, I hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Can I have everyone come up? My panelists, please. here. Here. We're missing someone, aren't we? Oh, here, yeah. Here. And I'll be on the edge. So it's my pleasure to be moderating this this panel. Excellent lineup here on technology on the front line. What's next for transatlantic cooperation in the defense sector? And it's a truism to say that having the technological advantage is critical to success on the front line. That's not new. It's historically always been the case in one way or the other. But what is new is how fast the cutting edge of technology is moving forward and how quickly innovative applications of technology are making their way onto today's battlefields. And we see that a lot in Ukraine today. We see that as well in the Middle East. And meanwhile, as we're all painfully aware, Europe is lagging behind in innovating and adopting technological solutions for defense quite significantly. And that makes Europe a bit of a junior partner in transatlantic cooperation in tech, and indeed puts it in quite a vulnerable position, both militarily and politically, as we see dependencies being exploited more and more. So, as I just said to Stormy, what could transatlantic cooperation on defense look like with Europe now stepping up? Can Europe technologically do more to provide for its own defense? Can it be a somewhat equal partner to the US and even a global force to be reckoned with? I'm really looking forward to see what the panel thinks on this. And losing no further time, I want to introduce them from left to right. We have Marina Henke. She's Professor of International Relations and Director of the Center for International Security at the Hertie School here in Berlin. Big round of applause. Thomas Silberhorn is member of the Bundestag for the CSU. In the previous CDU-CSU-led governments, he was spokesperson for transatlantic relations and parliamentary state secretary in the Ministry of Defense. We have Heli Tierma-Klar. She currently chairs the steering group of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group's IT coalition, bit of a mouthful. In other words, she rounds up support for Ukrainian military's cyber defense capabilities and IT infrastructure. And previously, she led cyber policy and diplomacy at the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the European External Action Service. Payne Griffin is Senior Director at FTI Consulting. Previously, he was Chief of Staff to a member of the US House of Representatives, Dale Strong, and during the first Trump administration, he was Deputy Chief of Staff to US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer. And to my right, I should not skip our virtual participant, Sergei Lagodinsky, joining us from Brussels, I assume, is member of the European Parliament and vice chair of the Greens EFA group. He's also the Greens EFA spokesperson for Russia and the United States. Thanks for joining us on screen. And Anna Wojtas is co-founder and co-CEO of the Women in Defense Tech Network. Previously, she held a number of positions in the private sector at the nexus of tech and national security. So, thank you all for coming on this topic. Very wide spectrum of expertise and backgrounds in this panel. So I just wanted to take the first round to take the panel's temperature here with a quick question to everybody. And coming back to the kind of the elephant in the room, could each of you, in 3 words, maybe maximum a sentence, tell us what are your expectations and fears for the NATO summit going on right now in The Hague? I'll start with Marina.
Well, I hope it's not just about money, but about strategy, because you can have piles of money if you don't know actually what you want to do with it, then it's not ideal.
This is the NATO summit at which European leaders will communicate that they understood Europe has to take over responsibility for our own security in cooperation with our transatlantic partners, but we have to do our homework now.
Well, with 3 words, I'm worried about finding consensus.
Thanks.
My 3 words would be constrained US defense budgets and how that affects US prioritization.
Mm-hmm. Sergey.
I think nice to be here. it will be a kind of a make it or break it point regarding US-European cooperation and how we can align our own ambitions in the European Union with the NATO structures.
Yeah, just maybe like a broader one is like, I hope it's a refocus on like common values, and then doing everything what you mentioned.
Yeah, thanks so much for those quick inputs. I think a lot of very important points already. I'm going to stay on also on like Anna just made the kind of a big picture point as I circle back around to Marina. On a kind of a high level, from a kind of high level view, as someone who thinks a lot about strategy, what is the big picture thinking right now when it comes to strengthening our defense cooperation, and in practice and in credibility, and where do you think tech fits into that?
So defense cooperation between Europe and the United States has always been driven by two different factors. The first one was a political factor, right? So like we wanted to buy American goodwill, American sympathy, kind of like create this close relationship and kind of like keep the United States interested in our affairs in Europe, because we saw, ever since the end of the Cold War, the US drifting away. And you saw bits and pieces of that, like in critical investment decisions, in critical cooperation decisions. The most famous one and the latest one, certainly the purchase here in Germany of the F-35, just weeks after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It was as much political a signal to the United States. We kind of in Europe were somewhat wrong on Russia. Now we're back and we really want to invest in this cooperation. And the big question here is, does this logic still work going forward? Can we, quote unquote, buy an American army? Can we buy American goodwill? Is the Trump administration, but also administrations going forward, can they be kind of lured into being interested in Europe on that political angle? And the other pillar that was also always present was, of course, getting the capabilities, right? The defense industries in the United States is the best in the world. We are lagging behind, so we want to have the technology here. But I think here the big dilemma is that even in Germany, where we are right now, this rearmament program, it has two sides of the coin. Yes, of course, it is about deterring Russia and taking defense seriously, but the other side of the coin is that we need to revive our economic base. And so, if we now spend 600 billion or even more on defense, it also needs to have these spin-offs in our civilian industries. And here, of course, if you just keep on buying technology from the United States, this kind of like revival or re-energizing of European defense industrial bases don't really work, right? So it cannot be, just like getting the technology from there and having like kind of the heavy machinery that is already produced in Europe, and we have pockets of excellence that is already there. So I think we really need to walk very fine lines in the kind of like political field, but also in this kind of technology field. And I hope this was kind of like big picture enough for you to start this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to go a little bit out of turn because what you just elaborated fits so well with what I wanted to ask Payne later on in this round. Payne Griffin, the US has been demanding increases in European defense spending, and some people would probably maybe take issue with framing it purely as a gesture of goodwill and buying goodwill in the US. But the dilemma is there. When those plans for Europe to become more capable turn towards also buying more European, we quickly get a lot of pushback from US policymakers who would actually like to see more buy American. So from the American side, is it kind of a bit of a case of wanting your cake and eating it too? So is there kind of a Goldilocks spot there between?
Yeah, certainly. I think there's an ideological mismatch between the Trump administration's intentions by forcing Europe to invest 5% and Europe's intentions of committing the 5%, right? From the European side, you see very strong reactions inside the member states saying that we are going to buy Europe. From the American side, I really think President Trump hears 5% and thinks we're going to sell a bunch of Lockheed Martin missiles and planes. There's also a risk that I do not think has been fully realized yet, that as the Trump administration starts to see the rollout of this spending and pretty significant ideological blocks on, at least if not U.S. technology, the production of that technology in the United States, that you have a risk of sort of re-inflaming the trade tensions, which hopefully by that point have been somewhat resolved. Right, we get through the July 9th period into some sort of détente on trade, and then you could very easily see as the president, becomes upset that Boeing is not selling enough into the European market, he restarts the trade war. As you all know, for President Trump, all of these different policy agendas are interrelated with each other. And so I think you're right. I think this is a pretty significant risk. It is not something that we have seen play out yet, but it's certainly something that is worth considering, particularly as you see a lot of American defense companies sort of trying to front-load this by signing into joint ventures with European firms. We've seen a Saab joint venture recently. Rheinmetall has had several to sort of procure defense systems that Europe is lacking, but all of those joint venture agreements assume that the production will be in Europe, and at some point the Trump administration will figure this out.
All right, I want to drill further down into kind of exactly the question, where's this spending going, with Mr. Silberhorn. If Germany makes good on the reported new NATO pledge of spending 3.5%, 5%, including infrastructure and so on defense by 2029, that would amount to a budget increase of about 70 billion euros. From your perspective, looking at how technological advances have reshaped the battlefields in Ukraine and the Middle East, and looking at the lessons from that, how does adapting to technological changes factor into how Germany should spend this extra money?
Well, first, I think not everybody realizes what this means, 3.5%. So 1% is about 42 billion euros. 3.5% means more than 1/3 of our annual budget. So it's not 3.5% of the annual budget, but of the GDP. But we have budget week next week and 3 budget weeks in September, so at least the members of the parliament will realize until September latest what this means to really significantly step up our annual budget. And there will be a proposal of the finance ministry, because this has not been done in the last legislative term. We had a special fund, but this was not integrated in our annual budget, and that's the task we have now to fulfill. It's not only about procurement. We have to identify our strategic capability lacks. We are suffering from for years already. We are very advanced in land systems in Germany. And I think we should have the ambition to be the best in land systems as Germans, and in cooperation with all our European partners. We are quite advanced in marine systems. German submarines are perfect, and we can also corvettes and frigates. In air systems, we did a lot. All the major procurements have been mandated years ago, and we are already developing the next generation together with France, also in our air systems. But we have strategic capability lacks when it comes, for example, to communication, satellite communication, when it comes to air defense, or, for example, strategic air transportation. And this new money, and in the end we had a decision not only to, or it is now decided at this NATO summit to provide 3.5% for defense. We had a decision in the last legislative term, at the end, in February, at the end of January to change our constitution, and that allows us to finance our security, military and civilian security, in the end with no limit. The political decision that has been taken is we can and we want to finance what is needed. But we have to do it in a strategic way. Identify the gaps, and then there's a certain need to go wide and not deep for the coming years. It's no use to develop the next version of the already best tank. Now we have to go wide, because in the current situation with war in Europe, quantity becomes a factor of quality in itself. And that's why quantity, that has not been our major focus for years, because we always had a small army, and that's why the focus was on quality and at high-end development. Now we have to go wide instead of deep. And at the same time, we have to invest in research and development and in going deeper for the next generation, but for the coming years, for re-establishing our defense posture and deterrence, we have to go wider than we did in the last 20 years.
And to touch back on what was said before, how important is it to you that we get these wide capabilities from Europe, or can we even, in your perspective?
Well, the area is so big that there is a lot of room for transatlantic cooperation. But of course, our major weapon systems are already placed in Germany and Europe. There's a lot of room for a closer cooperation also among European Union member countries. But when it comes to air defense, for example, of course, the United States remain a strategic partner. When it comes to new technologies, this is a new challenge for all of us, because the speed in which new technologies are developed and brought to market and brought in the field cannot be topped by our complex and long-standing planning and procurement procedures. So we have to become a bit quicker and more agile. But we have to also to ensure that our military leaders get readiness and agility, because their knowledge is key for implementing new technologies in applicable systems for the troops. In this regard, for example, we succeeded in placing a special fund for each commander of the German army years ago already. This has been prolonged by the last ministers, also by Pistorius. I just heard 2 weeks ago, there is no limit now, no budget limit for the commanders. So they decide on their own demand. They don't have to ask anybody to accept their military procurement demands. They decide on their own. They have the money to realize it, and they can just purchase drones whatsoever, and they do it. 2 weeks ago, a soldier told me that they are now at the top of development. It would have taken at least 1 more year if they had used the old or the existing procurement and planning structures, but we did not change these structures, but we complemented it by a second track of quick procurement and purchasing by the military leaders themselves. And this enables them to be very close to the newest technologies, to make it applicable as soon as possible for their military purposes. And we just created the structures and said, do what you need and look that you get ready.
And I will circle back to the topic of getting quicker, I think, when we get more of the private sector perspective in as well. But I want to switch to the Brussels perspective first. Sergey, the EU just came out with 2 pretty significant documents on tech in the last 2 weeks. First, the EU International Digital Strategy placed focus on international partnerships to fill Europe's technology needs. And then a week later, the Digital Decade report, the State of the Digital Decade, came out. We're now about halfway through 2025, and acknowledged serious shortcomings and dependencies in Europe on things like AI, cloud, semiconductors, and so on, including especially at the nexus of the civilian and the defense sectors. So what does it look like from Brussels? Where do we strike the balance between trying to become more self-sufficient and relying on partners, and what investments, to pick up a keyword that was directed at us earlier, do you see as fruitful, and where should we maybe rethink doing things on our own?
Yes, thank you. A couple of points that are kind of the neuralgic points, as they say in German, are important that you mentioned. I think the 2 points, or maybe the 3 points that are important are in both areas, innovation and defense, is the issue of resources, especially on the European level, is a problematic point. The issue of structures and the issue of strategy. And I think that even starting with the first one, we're already getting into trouble because as opposed to nation states and member states, we don't have our own resources. We don't have taxes that we can take. There is a debate about digital tax, but this is probably going to remain a debate. We cannot print money. We cannot borrow money to the extent that it's sometimes not necessary because Germany or Nordics are against it. So what happens is what I call a von der Leyen Verschiebebahnhof. The German speakers would understand is that very often the president is forced to present packages and strategies which are in fact parts of strategies that existed before, or the money that was already planned for something else, which is rebranded. And this is in both areas. In defense, with the famous 850 billion euros, which are not 850 billion euros if we really take it seriously, and the same in the area of innovation. What I'm working on now is the so-called small rearm omnibus. This is an attempt to release the money from in the area of innovation for defense and dual-use purposes. And this is very, it might sound very detailed and maybe boring, but this is precisely the attempt that is made on how to get more money in the innovation area towards things that we need, developing AI, and also in the digital, in the defense area to develop drones, etc., etc. But there we're coming, of course, in a very debatable and very problematic issue, which we see in Germany is also increasingly being instrumentalized. Basically trying to say, taking money for defense means taking money away from something else. In Germany, you solved it, and we solved it in a different way. In Europe, you will have to talk about kind of rededication of money from one pocket, where, for example, it was for combating climate change, or for having civilian innovation like in Horizon Europe, and redirecting it to dual use and defense. It is a huge challenge because you have to explain it not only to the government of Spain, but you will have to explain it to our citizens who, of course, think this is the money that was for other purposes than defense. So this is a challenge, but we are working on this, on how to deal with this, and the Commission is working as well. I think the larger issue is the strategy. And we have a strategic lack of kind of a strategic decision-making because the 27 governments getting together cannot make strategic decisions on a regular basis. So in both areas, in defense area and also in innovation area, we will need to think about structures that would allow us to make strategic decisions. In the defense area, I think we will not be able to survive without getting rid of spoilers like Hungary in this area and going towards a core Europe of defense without those who are not willing, and going to something like what I call the old version of EU Security Council. So a small number of states may be elected, but that make decisions for everyone else. And I know probably for Mr. Silberhorn and many others, the domestic and the national parliamentarians, it would be something unimaginable or something invading into their sovereignty. But if we don't solve it strategically and structurally on the level of European Union, both in innovation but also in defense, we will not be able to advance, and we will not be able to project the power vis-a-vis Kremlin or anyone else, because they're watching very closely, and they see every time the inability of us to decide in both issues is an opportunity for them. So from that perspective, I think we will need to make some painful and innovative decisions in the area of structures and decision making. If we don't, I wouldn't say we're doomed, but we will be having huge problems in the future and will not be able to grow up from being an innovative dwarf towards an international political actor.
Thanks. Thanks, scattered applause, in case you didn't hear it over there. I want to follow up on one thing that you didn't mention, one maybe neuralgic word, and that's regulation and ethics. I know we've been, I know you were in Washington with us at the Munich Security Conference event last month. We had a discussion about this. We hear from the U.S. and we've been seeing it in the U.S. A kind of no holds barred, full steam ahead approach to critical technologies, emerging technologies, especially like AI, clearing obstacles out of the way for innovation and adoption, and kind of with the logic that trust and ethical guardrails will come after adoption in a way. And I know that this would probably rub a lot of people in Brussels the wrong way. Do you see these differences on ethical questions surrounding emerging technologies as a potential obstacle to defense cooperation, Europe and transatlantically speaking?
Well, to be honest, I don't see a truly trustworthy and cooperation based on trust if the current administration and their big tech companies who are kneeling towards them and in front of them are destroying the fundamental trust relationship. I mean, EDIP, European Defense Industry Program, which I was responsible for in AFET committee, just in one of the committees. It was important for me, for example, to make sure that if we work with Ukraine, and it is one of the goals of this program to integrate Ukrainian industrial defense base into European one and vice versa, that we will be careful not to have intellectual property rights or other rights to be captured by third parties, by third states. Whom do you mean? You can mean whoever, but you can also mean the United States. And to be honest, the picture that I had when I was thinking about this was the United States and the minerals deal. You know, we cannot invest into Ukrainian industrial process and then have American administration coerce Ukrainians to, give up on intellectual property and R&D results of our investments. This is dynamics which are very unpleasant, but these are the dynamics that were unleashed by this American administration. And this makes cooperation in sensitive areas very difficult. That's why this NATO summit will be yet another example of whether or not we will be able to go forward with this. And again, on tactical level, I know the cooperation between the armies in NATO with Americans is going very well. but in terms of strategic trust, the strategic trust is very very damaged. And one of the problems and the deficits that the regulation that we are enacting here, and we can have a debate about whether this regulation is something helpful or not helpful, but this is our debate. This is a debate among our constituencies, among our parties, and this debate is very lively. It is not a debate where some position should be dictated from Washington. And this is precisely where the problem is coming from, that there is a feeling, or something that J.D. Vance told us in Washington, that we are attacking American big tech. Nobody's attacking American big tech. We want a structure and regulatory structure as well, which would be fitting the preferences of our voters and of our interests. This is not against the United States, but there is a feeling that this is against the United States. If this goes in this direction, then I think we will be having more and more problems about our different regulatory cultures we can discuss, but this is about trust, and this should not be damaged by this administration.
Thanks for those points. I'd be remiss if I don't bring in how I hear it put the Washington Insider on this question quickly. Payne, do you see what Sergei was saying, a kind of a disconnect between a tactical level of cooperation and a strategic level of cooperation? And do you think we should be having these discussions about values? Is there any something to be gained from that when it comes
Certainly,
to tech?
I'm the disconnect guy on this panel. So, look, I think the Trump administration has a very transactional approach with respect to defense technology with AI. You saw a debate early on the administration about how they should continue or change the Biden administration's export control regime with respect to semiconductors. David Sachs and his team clearly won that by allowing the exportation of American technology stacks to the Middle East. You're going to see this debate continue. Now, I do think there's a lot of area for cooperation, particularly with the U.S. Congress. The Congress, to Mr. Silberhorn's point earlier, is actually quite receptive to the idea that Europe should lead on its national champions with developing capabilities for ground wars in Europe. The U.S. has a lot of interest in de-investing from those types of technologies, from tanks, from armored personnel carriers, from things that are particularly useful in this theater. And reinvesting into the Pacific theater, which is where a lot of people in the Trump administration want to pivot the U.S. government to focusing on. One other very quick point I'll make is that the U.S. defense budget is sort of at a high watermark right now. So the Trump administration has proposed essentially flatlining U.S. defense budget year over year, which represents a 3 to 4% practical cut with inflation. Now, they want to replace that through the reconciliation bill, but that obviously still has some questions on whether or not that can be passed in Congress. We're starting to approach a place in the U.S. where the fiscal situation is really going to bite the ability for the U.S. to maintain its growth trajectory in defense spending. What that means is a lot of these small tech companies that the U.S. has been supporting through the defense budget are quickly going to run out of space. And we'll be looking for other markets. And so, I think there are a lot of opportunities for Europe to rebuild those capabilities through joint ventures, through M&A. There are going to be a lot of American companies who are looking to do business in Europe because their pipeline for defense spending in the U.S. is in a difficult place.
I'm in a bit of a bind here. I want to bring in both Anna and Haley equally strongly, but I want to jump on something that you just brought up at the end, that there might actually be a bit of a squeeze for American defense startups and that potential for them to actually look into branching into other markets. That seems like a bit of a problem if you're promoting European defense startups, and in general, I mean, we're already at a bit of a disadvantage here in Europe. Startups tend to follow the funding. The funding is in the U.S. The big VCs are in the U.S. because the big tech and defense companies are in the U.S. So it's a kind of a rich get richer dynamic. How can we in Europe break through that a little bit and get a bigger piece of the cake?
So first of all, I don't think like it's quite like negative vibes, but I think, especially like from a private sector perspective, defense tech is now really on fire, and it has like there are several aspects to that, especially in Germany, but also European. Of course, first there is money, and money drives innovation. We have tech talent, especially if you look into the paradigm shift into software-defined defense. We have the talent in Europe. Like, this is not something we don't have. We have TUM Munich, we have Hasselplattner Institute. Those are really, like, these are top talents. And now, because the money is in Europe, they don't need to go to, like, Silicon Valley or something. That's one thing. And I think we should have more ambition to just, you know, like, provide the best tech. Like, I think the best tech will win. And we can talk about strategic and transatlantic collaborations, and there will be some, because money, you know, what Payne just said is like there will be M&As, there will be collaborations. I mean, Rheinmetall just partnered with Anduril, and this will be something we will see more and more. Maybe Lockheed Martin and Helsing next time, I don't know. And of course, as soon as they get bigger, and I just take the example of Helsing, I'm not speaking on behalf, but it's just like a hypothetical scenario. Helsing will need to scale at some point, so of course, US market will be attractive. And the same for like, you know, startups coming from US, they will try to sell into Europe. And I think there we will see like true collaboration. What we need more in Europe or in Germany is the public-private collaboration. And I think Thomas already said there is some, and I'm pleased to see, like, you know, Cyber Innovation Hub, we have NATO Diana, we have all the programs in place which are fostering it. And the tech talent right now is like really looking into defense tech. Defense tech was for years like not interesting at all. Like, I mean, I work in that industry for like 20 years, and it was nothing like, I mean, people were interested because, of course, I also like a woman in that field, but it was never something like really interesting. But now it's like, oh, wow, like, you know, there are like really cool things happening. And I think allowing more of the public and private innovation cycles, so getting the engineers like really to the military people and then working on stuff together, like what is really needed, I think will drive it, and I hope we will see more of the, like, you know, unicorn startups in Europe. And yeah, the best will win, and I think that will drive definitely also the transatlantic collaboration.
I think maybe the question is, we've been talking maybe too much, from maybe Haley would say we've been maybe talking too much about where we get tech from, Europe or the US. I have the impression that probably leading the IT coalition for Ukraine, you have to be very pragmatic, right, about where you source software, hardware, computing power, and so on. Does it matter from a Ukrainian perspective, or where its capabilities come from, Europe or the US? Does digital sovereignty or something play a role in your thinking, or what can we learn from Ukraine's experience in integrating these kind of different inputs from different players?
Well, I think we have seen so far the development that Ukraine needs everything now and sooner, tomorrow, today. So that therefore we do not have a luxury of thinking about where the technology comes from. Certainly we are relying on the technologies produced by the democratic nations. But since we have seen the unreliability of some of the major providers recently, so there are questions rising, yes, how can we duplicate some of those key capabilities here in Europe? And we are working with some European companies, for instance, to build satellite communications and the key capabilities that we all need in case there will be conflict here in Europe. Also, what always I think makes me wonder when people like us here, in all these Europeans in the same room, are talking about the need to innovate. What I have seen in recent years, what Ukrainians are doing, I think it's not so much about they sit down and they innovate now suddenly. So therefore, I think we have to be also careful of thinking that money fixes the innovation. Money itself is not fixing the innovation. In a way, you cannot put the defense people in the room and tell them innovate. You have to somehow bring defense close where innovation happens anyways. That would be my advice, because just pouring more money into the defense sector and tell them, now innovate, please, I'm not sure that it will happen. So, because this is a civilian domain, the domain is civilian. We don't have except for maybe putting some bombs on the drones. Yes, we don't have military-only tech. It's all dual use. And Ukrainians are innovating because they need to. They innovate under the fire. They innovate in the basements where they work. And everything that we could do to help them would be obsolete in 2 weeks' time. So this is another realization. And and how they innovate is that they have lots of talent, very young talent, strong in STEMs, motivated young talent. And sometimes I'm looking at those Ukrainian teams. They are the same age of my kids, who are 22 and 24. And then I'm thinking whether if we had to replicate that in our basement somewhere in Berlin or in Warsaw or in Tallinn, whether it would be so easy and to get all the our youth to do the same innovations. All the video gamers are now suddenly doing defense. So I think this is the reality in Ukraine. Whether we like it or not, I'm just not telling something which is made up. This is the reality. They are very young teams that come up with the solutions. So coming back to your original question, our role is to facilitate what they are doing. Give them the software and hardware and stuff what they need.
Yeah. So I take away is we need to be faster, as Thomas Silberhorn said, and we also need to make more use of our talent, as we heard from our last two speakers. And before we run out of time, I want to give the opportunity for some questions from the audience. Please do keep it short, and please do make it a question, because I will cut you off if I don't hear a question mark in due time. The lady in blue here.
Hi, my name is Carlotta Pensken. I just graduated from my master's in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown University in Security Studies. And Heli, you just perfectly set me up for this question, because there is a saying that militaries tend to fight the last war. And we've talked a lot about where the money is coming from, but specifically in Germany, but also in Europe, how can we make sure that we innovate to fight the next war and not just to catch up to what Ukraine is doing today?
Do you want to point that at someone in particular, or should I just say?
Anyone who's interested in taking on the question.
Yeah. Okay. Get one more. Yeah, we'll get one more. Do I see one? Yeah, here in the front.
Is it on? Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm Lena Strauss from Academic Association for Security Studies, and talking about the frontline in tech on the frontline. There's one specific frontline we haven't really talked about until now, and that is space. I know it's a huge topic, but my specific question would be, what is the current state of transatlantic innovation cooperation in the space sector, particularly in defense-related technologies, and how can this partnership be strengthened to ensure strategic advantage in areas like secure communications, space-based surveillance and resilient satellite infrastructure? Maybe Mrs. Wouters or Mr. Silberhorn are able to answer my question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Marina, I think you wanted to take the next war question.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely critical, because especially I think in a setting like this one, sometimes we get very excited about technology, and then, you know, like we think technology can drive strategy, technology can drive policy. But that's actually flawed. First, we we as citizens, but then like transmitted through our members of Congress and the government, we need to decide what is actually our strategic goal. What is it that we want to achieve? And truth to be told, I'm not so sure. Right? Is it to defend Ukraine? Is it to somehow deter Russia, but from doing what? Invading the Baltics, or is it just the German border? But whatever it is, what the strategic goal is then, we need to start thinking, what are we lacking to achieve that strategic goal? And then technology comes in. Because in the end, technology is a tool. It is not, we are not investing in technology for technology's sake. And here, also in Germany, we have a contradiction, right? Because as I said before, there is this massive desire right now of the German government to also revive the German industry. And I think here it gets tricky, because if actually your core strategic goal is to, have economic growth and bring Germany up to speed with American technology and global technology, that is a different strategic goal than actually deterring Russia and, potentially defending Ukraine. There could be overlaps, but it's still a different strategic goal. So back to your question, that needs to be the first riddle that we solve. At Germany's level, at the EU level, and I completely agree with Sergey, we don't have the structures to actually find a consensus right now that works in Europe, but also at NATO. And then we need to think about, where actually does technology fit in? Because otherwise, we are just kind of being driven either by fighting the last war or by industry interests, and they're, again, different, right, than what we actually need.
Okay, Thomas and Anna, do you both want to take a shot at the space question?
As I already pointed out, this is an area of strategic capabilities. The Bundeswehr already established the necessary structures on the civilian and the military side for cyber and space. The topic has been mentioned in our coalition treaty and in some political papers, so it got some awareness in the political scene. But now we have to come to concrete progress. There is already a lot of know-how in Germany and Europe, for example, when it comes to satellite communication or production of satellites. And the current status that Elon Musk sent some thousands of satellites in the orbit should encourage us to decide that we need some 300 or 400 satellites for communication in Europe. I think this is doable for us. Of course, it requires some coordination in the European Union, among European NATO partners, but this is an area in which we really should invest and gain some autonomy for laying the structures to take our own responsibility. Satellite communication is absolutely key, and for military purposes. And if you allow to add some words on cooperation with the private sector, we do not only need procurements for private companies also need access to finance. This is a topic in Europe due to thoughts on taxonomy in the European Union. This is absolutely harmful for defense industries. This is one of the reasons why private investors now step in, because there is a lack of financing for the defense industries. And we should try on the political side to reduce the obstacles and the barriers for access to finance. But at the same time, it's also really a great opportunity for many investors and funds to step in, because the public sector will not be able to substitute the finance sector in this regard. So we now provide a lot of money for procurement, for rearming our troops, but we cannot at the same time provide additional money to finance the industry to develop their production lines. So we can only do one side of this financing, and the other side has to be done by reducing taxonomy demands and by bringing in the private sector.
And bringing in the private sector, I want to give you the last word, Anna.
Yeah,
to either disagree or agree or...
A little bit of contrarian.
And can I then add a little bit of a European issue, because there is some information, but if I have time after Anna.
Okay. So the contrarian point is about we need a strategy first, so we need like a vision first, especially like what are we developing for right now. I already mentioned it, we have this shift towards software-defined defense. And every system will be like AI enabled at some point. And what we see, especially in the field of AI, is like how quick the innovation cycles are. And I think this will drive something towards like a bigger system or bigger vision than we know right now. I think technology will not drive the innovation maybe, but also the vision where like weapon systems, ISR, satellite systems will be at some point. So this is something what I foresee next to having a strategy and having a vision and knowing where we're going to. But technologically, on that side, I think it will be the developments we see.
Thanks, Anna. And Sergei, you can have a quick rebuttal if you can keep it under a minute.
Yeah, just very briefly, we already have an IRIS-2 program, the low Earth orbit satellites, about 270 satellites, European-made, will be online, so to speak, by 2030. The question is, what do we do in between? And in between, I always say we should have a strategic parallelism. We should continue to rely on American partners, but what we saw is one thing is not sustainable if these partners are private and if these partners are non-European, Starlink. That means there is a lot of incentives for us, unfortunately, not to invest so much into joint projects, but to invest into our European sovereign technology. We will not be able to do it without Americans and without their chips, etc. And this is a good thing, but it must be very clear, IRIS-2 is our European answer to the challenge, and it will be online 2030.
Thanks, Sergei, you made it, and I think that's a really good piece of last words. Leaves a lot of room left for further discussion, but with that, I want to wrap it up here. Thank you so much to the great panel, and also to our audience for keeping it exemplary. 2 questions, no statements. I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much.
And as always, we will take a quick group picture up here of our panelists and moderators, so don't run away. And afterwards, we have to change the stage a little bit.